could have stayed in the game, because, like I said, it was a really good game in that first half or so. But then at the second half, Notre Dame takes over the running game. They ran for about 230 yards, if I'm not mistaken. Averaged about like 5 yards a carry or so. Ian Book did impress, though. Despite kind of the sluggish start, he didn't put up crazy numbers. It was 14 of 26. So good completion percentage. It was like 60.8, which is pretty decent, but a little on the lower side for Ian Book, but still pretty decent. He only had 1 touchdown passing, but he also adds 1 with the run, like I said, to take the lead right before halftime. Now the defense on Notre Dame is really where the strong part of this team is, kind of the anchor. But you could see that they definitely lost some people in the draft, kind of in the middle front 7 of that defense. When the Louisville Cardinals rush, 250 yards, 249 to be exact, averaging over 5 yards a carry, you can definitely tell that it's, at least at the beginning of the game, it wasn't the same team that you saw last year. Maybe it kind of looked a little bit more like the team in the beginning of the game that we saw in that playoff run. Don't want to break any hearts for bringing that up, but all in all, they had a good win. They pulled it out at the end, and they are going to be taking on. Who the hell are they going to be? Let's see. Schedule. Give me 1 second. Is it It's not New Mexico State, is it? Da-na-na. Wow. I can tell you it's not anybody good, because Notre Dame never, outside of Michigan and hold on, Control F it. Screw it. So Notre Dame, I know they have only really 2 good games this year, and that's going to consist of playing Michigan and playing Georgia, but neither of those are going to be next week's games. So yeah, not on my notes right here. But anyways, Notre Dame gets it done, and we'll wrap up week 1 right there. So let me take down this note. Boop, boop. Y'all hear that beep? Hopefully not. Now, actually, what we're gonna do is be getting into Scranton Strangler's top 25. There are a couple polls came out today. The AP poll, the coaches poll. I know CBS, ESPN, they all have their top 25. All of them a little bit different. I'm going to stray even more different. Outside of the top 4, they play New Mexico State, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, New Mexico State. Because New Mexico is actually not too bad. Thank you, Bryce. Appreciate that, man. But yeah, New Mexico State, they should easily win that one. New Mexico State, if I'm not mistaken, lost 48-7 against Washington last week. So, yeah, go Notre Dame, right? Go Fighting Irish. All right, so moving on, segueing into the top 25, Scranton Stranglers top 25. It's pretty much the same for those top 4. You're not going to hear any complaints or disputes from me. And, you got Clemson, you got Alabama, Georgia, and then Oklahoma. And then it tends to differ between all of those other 4 polls. I'm just going to throw it out there. There it is right there, and we'll kind of talk about it. I pushed down Ohio State. I think they're a little overrated. There's too much new there. They got a brand new head coach. They got a brand new quarterback. They got a brand new defensive scheme, and it showed a little bit. Obviously, they came out of the gates really kind of flying. They were up 28-0 in the first quarter, but immediately they stalled in the second quarter and the third quarter, things like that, against an FAU team in Lane Kiffin. That's not too good. So in the American, but. So I put LSU. LSU immensely impressed me this week. Their defense is always going to be stacked. They always, that's DB University right there. But they had 98 total yards of offense against them, which is outstanding. But then you look in, and they're more. When you think of LSU, you think of a defense. You think of a running game. Their quarterback had some of the best numbers, in the league last week. Burrows, he threw for 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, like 400 yards. It just very impressed me, and you don't really see those kind of numbers from an LSU quarterback. So That's number 5 and number 7 are actually going to be playing each other this week. They're going to take care of each other. So one of those teams is going to be out of that top 5, depending on how, or I'm sorry, out of the top 10, essentially, depending on how that game goes. But then I stuck Ohio State right in the middle. You know, I don't want to drop them too far. They did win, even though it wasn't as comfortable or as big as everybody thought they were going to. They didn't cover that spread, damn it. So I got that one wrong, damn it. Anyways, but then you go to number 7, and that's Texas. From an Oklahoma fan, I can say that Texas looks pretty good. The quarterback, it's not the best quarterback in the nation, but he's extremely solid. He's the toughest quarterback in one of the top 3 toughest quarterbacks in the nation. They have a really good receiving core, even though they lost little Jordan Humphrey. I think Colin Johnson, go Longhorns. I see that. I was waiting for that comment, Bryce. But they one of their best. They returned their best receiver, in my opinion. I thought Colin Johnson is I think who's their best receiver last year. He returns again this year. Couple little holes in the offense. They're kind of running out of running backs in the stable. They've had a quarterback transfer, or he transferred his position into a running back to kind of help him out, and their backup running back was a linebacker that was transferred into a running back. So little couple holes there, just because of injuries that they've had, but they've got they've always had a good solid running game. They'll ground and pound you, so it mainly kind of goes towards the offensive line, which I think they'll be fine. Michigan was kind of tough. Their offense looked good. This is going to be the best quarterback that they've had in like a decade. They have an amazing receiving core. They have obviously the best defensive coordinator in the not the National Football League, in college football in the entire nation. So this is really their conference, the Big Ten. This is theirs to lose. The only person that stands in their way is big old Mr. Ohio State at number 6. And the reason why I have them above them is simply just because they haven't beat them in the past 8 years. So it's kind of tough for me. They went 0-7 against Urban Meyer. Now, again, Urban Meyer's not there. We'll see how much that changes and see if Ryan Day can kind of continue that trend for Ohio State, just absolutely dominating Michigan every year. Then a surprise for most people, I put Texas A&M at number 9. Texas A&M looked phenomenal. The quarterback even impressed me probably the most, and I wasn't, too big on Kellen Mond at the beginning of the season. I thought he was an average, decent SEC quarterback that'll give you 2, maybe 3 really solid performances. But other than that, there's going to be some issues. But man, he killed it. Go watch that tape. I'm not a Texas A&M guy, but hey, he impressed me a lot. So Texas A&M, I have squeaking into the top 9. Because of their domination. Now, Notre Dame, they did take I put Texas A&M just ahead of them. That was kind of my internal. It was a little struggle right there for me because they're 2 really solid teams, but the defensive play, which is Notre Dame's number 1 strong suit, took a step back. So I'm going to have them just take a step back. It's tough for Notre Dame because they're not even in a conference, so it's they're going to lose out on at least one game. Yeah, they're going to lose out on one game because they play less games than everybody. So it's all those weeks whenever they play Michigan, whenever they play Georgia, they have to show out. They have to dominate on that one. So I'm excited to see when that's going to happen. 11, Washington. A lot of people are kind of low on Washington because they lost a bunch of people in the draft, or lost a bunch of people graduating last year. But I'm here to tell you that Jacob Eason, he's just as good as the last quarterback. Man, he does have he has got a very good supporting cast around him. That wide receiver number 2, Aaron. He made some one-handed snags, looking like Odell Beckham or me probably back in the day. No, I'm just kidding. But he was killer. So the quarterback Jacob Eason, he was a Georgia quarterback. Didn't win the job, obviously, Jake Fromm. So him and Justin Fields transferred out, and both of those quarterbacks pretty much showed out this weekend. So we can. That's a testament to just how stacked Georgia is at quarterback, how good Jake Fromm is, because those guys showed out, and this guy's the one that beat him. So Auburn. Then we're gonna go into Auburn. I'm gonna put Auburn up there, man. As much as they should have lost that game. They had plenty of opportunities, at least 4 or 5 that they should have lost. They had a really, really young, inexperienced quarterback that's kind of inaccurate against the run. But they faced one of the best, if not the best, number one NFL quarterback prospect in the draft next year, and they made him look silly. He made very terrible decisions. He didn't take care of the ball, but importantly, they shut him down whenever the biggest moment arises. And he's got a 3rd and 10 or something like that, and he throws a 4-yard check down route on dinking and dacking. So that just shows that they don't necessarily need that quarterback. He can be kind of young and reckless because the defense, especially the defensive line, is going to take care of them, make sure they get the ball back, because they've got like 5th-year seniors on their defensive line. Extremely great chemistry between those guys right there. Then we're going to drop down to Penn State. Where did they come from, right? They lose their quarterback. They've lost Saquon 2 years ago. Then they lost Miles Sanders so they've lost some of their big playmakers over the past, and they go out and I wrote them off, and they won 79-7. So they show that they can clearly still score a lot of points. They can still play defense, only giving up 7 points against collegiate team. So Penn State, I apologize for writing you off. There's my apology right there. That's the last one you're going to get. 14, I've got UCF. A lot of people sleeping on them because Mackenzie Milton's not there anymore. They lost what was it, Shaquem Griffin. All that. They lose a lot of talent. Even though that was 2 years ago, but Mackenzie Milton was kind of the big one. This team hasn't lost in the last 2 seasons. They're undefeated 2 seasons in a row, and by the looks on this one and their schedule, it is a little powder puffy in that conference. That looks like they might make it a 3rd. Quarterback Brandon Wimbush, he used to be the quarterback for Notre Dame, transfers. I was not big on him. It was kind of another one of those things that I need to say, hey, I admit that I was wrong on Brandon Wimbush. He's more of a runner, and his completion percentage was still kind of bad, but it was better than 50%, and that's what over 20 games at Notre Dame. That's what his completion percentage was, 50.8, and so he had it was like 12 touchdowns, and 8. Let's see, I don't remember. It was either 8 touchdowns and 12 interceptions or 12 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Regardless, that's not a good for a starting quarterback, especially, at Notre Dame. So, transfers to UCF. I put him on the back burners a little bit, and within the first quarter, I had already took to, if y'all follow me on Twitter, y'all know this, but I already took to Twitter and I admitted that I was wrong. So UCF and Penn State, 13 and 14. I'm giving y'all a little bit of love right here and putting y'all up where y'all belong. Then we go into kind of the back half, if you will, a little bit less than half, but Wisconsin, man, Jonathan Taylor is a monster. We'll get to him on the next segment here in about 5 minutes, but Wisconsin defense looked absolutely stacked, which we knew. Big Ten is usually really good defenses and just atrocious offenses. This is one of the 3, maybe 4 teams in the Big Ten that can actually play on both sides of the football. And whenever you got a running back, one of the best running backs in college, and Jonathan Taylor behind that offensive line, woo! So the Big Ten, nobody needs to sleep on that running game. Then we go to Florida. Yes, they were number 8 last week, and they did win, but they barely won. They shouldn't have won against a non-ranked team. It was so sloppy. DeFrank, something like that. I forget his last name, but he did not look like a college quarterback. He looked like he was, almost like Bo Nix. Bo Nix, I'd pick Bo Nix, the quarterback for Auburn. That inaccurate on the run, that very, inexperienced quarterback over him, because he found a way to win a game against a lot better team. So I'm picking Florida down at the 16. They're gonna have to definitely show me something because from the looks of it, they're not a top 10, not a top 10 in my eyes. Even though all those other polls are gonna have them up there pretty much. Oregon drops because, well, hey, they lost. I saw some of those polls, AP, the coaches poll. If you look at them, some of them still have Oregon above Auburn. That's disrespectful. That is disrespectful to Auburn. Auburn flat out won that game, even though they could have lost it at any point. That was Justin Herbert's game for the taking right there. Hey, I'm going to show you I can finally win against a top-ranked SEC team, and he couldn't do it. He threw a 5-yard pass on a 3rd and 10 and then punted it. So and just kind of prayed for his defense to do something when Oregon's defense is not known for their defense. So. Going down to Utah. Utah did win this one, win their game, but it was close. They had to have their defense kind of bail them out in the back half of the game with a couple of pick sixes. Their defenses are going to get multiple pick sixes every single game. So I need Utah to kind of start showing me a little bit more on offense. But defense, especially in the defensive front, they're pretty solid. I've got them at 18. Iowa at 19. I don't have Iowa State, as you can see on there, because they went into triple overtime against an FCS team. So that Big 12 team is out of the top 25. I dropped them, if you noticed. Then you got Washington State. Hey, Washington State looks good. Mike Leach team, of course. Their quarterback, which I'll get to on the next segment, dominated. In my opinion, had like the best numbers in the as far as a quarterback passing wise. So hey, that kid can ball. So keep an eye on them. Washington State in the Pac-12. Then we go to Syracuse. I'm sort of a slow start, but they just dominated all around. They won 24-0. So it's not ungodly numbers like some of these teams are putting up. But Syracuse, hey, they won 24-0. So I'm going to put them. I moved them up. Some people had them at 24. I'm going to push them up to 21. Michigan State. Oh my gosh, I was so. What's the word? Disappointed, like their defense is great, but their offense is atrocious. It is so bad. It is almost like a reverse Oklahoma of last year that had the worst defense but the best offense. Well, Michigan State doesn't have the best defense, but they sure do have the worst offense in college football. I say that lightly. They probably don't statistically have the worst, but personnel-wise, man, they've got to do something. They've got to figure out a better way to put up points because outside of that very, very first, touchdown, it was a touchdown pass to the running back who somehow stayed in. They didn't get anything done. So they have as much defensive touchdowns as they have offensive touchdowns for the year, and that's not good. That's one. Oklahoma State breaks into my top 25. Nobody has them in their top 25. And I'm wondering why. They're better than they are last year. They had a senior. It was his first time ever to start last year in Taylor Cornelius. He was a solid transition from Mason Rudolph, the great Oklahoma State Cowboy, to the next Oklahoma State great Cowboy, and I think that's going to be in Spencer Sanders. I've heard a lot about this kid. He was like he was a high school Texas quarterback of the year a couple years ago. I think he actually went to Lake Travis, if I'm not mistaken, which is quarterback where Baker Mayfield went. So this kid can absolutely throw the ball. He can run. He put up pretty dang good numbers, and he has a phenomenal supporting cast in Chuba Hubbard, Tylan Wallace, etc. We can go on for days with them. So 23 is Oklahoma State for the Scranton Strangler. We're going to finish out in the last two in Boise State. Boise State, nobody expected them to do anything. Florida State goes in their house. They start dominating, beating the hell out of Boise State by like 18 points, and then they came back and they scored 20-plus points to win that game. It was a great comeback. It was a great game. I had horrible flashbacks of the Boise State Oklahoma game in 2006, I think it was 2006-2007 season. So I was starting to have like shakes in the PTSD. I didn't like it. But Boise State gets the comeback from behind victory, and they weren't ranked before, but because of that one, they're going to beat a Florida State team that's starting to be on the uprise and kind of start making some sort with Blackman at quarterback, which is a heck of a player. That's enough to have them crack the top 24. And then 25 is going to be Stanford. Stanford, they got a lot to prove, in my opinion. They should have won the game 10-7, but their defense bailed them out at the very end. Got a strip sack for a touchdown and made it 17-7. So they barely won. A lot of people actually picked them to be upset against Northwestern. I didn't. I kind of knew that one, but I picked them to win, just not cover. And that very, very lucky touchdown at the end, that strip sack pushed them right over the edge. So. They did cover, actually. I think it was like a 6-7 point cover, and they won by 10 because of that crazy that good strip sack by the defense. So that's going to be Scranton Strangler's top 25. A little bit different from the conventional AP coaches poll, obviously except for that top 4. But that's going to be it. Fight me. Just kidding. Some of these teams are gonna kind of take care of themselves, especially this next week. You got my number 5 LSU gonna take on Texas. Obviously, Ohio State and Michigan's gonna kind of take care of itself. Next week we've got the number 1 Clemson going against Texas A&M. That's gonna be a really, really big game. So a lot of this is gonna be cleaned up, and I think by the end of the year this is gonna be it's going to be pretty clear cut kind of towards the college football playoffs. But this might be one of those years that 2 SEC teams make it in. But we've got like 10 weeks to go until that even happens, until we even think about that. So we're going to move on. That's Scranton Strangler's top 25. Let me know what you agree with, what you don't, all that good stuff. All right. This is the Heisman Watch. Heisman, we're going to do my top 5 and 1 honorable mention. I know this probably won't be a surprise to most people, and this is my unbiased opinion, but Jalen Hurts is the number 1 in the Heisman race because of his play on Saturday. On Sunday. I forget he played on Sunday instead of Saturday like he usually does. Dude was... he was unbelievable. I know he's harsh on himself. That's just who he is. He's a competitor. He's like Nick Saban Jr. out there. That's just how he's been trained to be for the past 3 years. He comes in, he graduates from Alabama, he transfers to Oklahoma in January, so he had a shortened time to learn the offense. The 2 previous quarterbacks that happened to win a Heisman Trophy and happened to get drafted first overall, they had over a year. Some of them had 2 years to learn the offense and kind of sit behind somebody. Well, this guy, he didn't. He got thrown in there, in the off season. He learned. He became a team captain. He earned everybody's respect, and I think he's going to be one of those guys that has the effect on the entire team, like Baker did, but it's different. Baker, it was more energized. He played. He just had a swag about him, if you will, and I miss Baker. Right? He's probably my favorite quarterback of all time for Oklahoma. But Jalen Hurts, he has an attitude. It's an attitude leadership about him. He has the right mindset. Everybody needs to be in that mindset that he is. Dude he threw 23 passes and completed 20 of them. So that's like an 86%, something like that, 86% completion rating. He threw for 332 yards in the air for 3 touchdowns, a QBR of 98.7, which, by the way, was the highest overall in the country. And then, if you didn't remember, he also ran for 176 yards and 3 total touchdowns. He was phenomenal. 3 touchdowns in the air, 3 touchdowns on the ground, 3 incompletions. Yeah, he wins 6 total touchdowns, 508 yards. That's a record for a quarterback or for a player's debut at Oklahoma, beating the previous Baker Mayfield. You might have heard from him, won a Heisman. He shatters his by over 100 at 396. Against Akron, well, Jalen Hurts goes 508 against Houston, which is even better school. So another record, he just happened to break. I don't have this up there, but he joins one other player besides Jalen has rushed for 100 yards and passed for 300, and that was Kyler Murray. You might have heard of him. He kind of won the Heisman last year. Well, he broke that. He was the only player now at Oklahoma to pass for over 300 yards and rush for over 150. So he topped that. The only player to do that in really the past recent years was a guy named Johnny Manziel. I'm sure you've heard of him. Also won a Heisman. So this guy is breaking just record after record. He's only played one game, and I think this year's going to be pretty special for him. I'm not saying he's going to win the Heisman, but because of his performance in week 1, it was unmatched across the country. So he's my number 1 in the Heisman race. We're going to go to 2. Travis Etienne Jr. If you watch me on any other social media, Twitter, all this kind of stuff, I've been giving this guy love since last Thursday when he played. Dude was incredible. Now you got to think about this. So they won the national championship last year, of course, with their stud Trevor Lawrence quarterback. Then he goes in. There's so much hype. Everybody has him. Whenever I say him, I say Trevor Lawrence winning the Heisman. Everybody has them, going to the national championship probably against Bama is what probably 99.8% of people out there have. But you got to hand it to this guy. He led the team. He was the workhorse for that team. Trevor Lawrence did not play good on Thursday. I don't care what stats you're looking at. They won the game. They dominated. It was because of this guy and how he set the tone and how he led the team running the ball. He only carried the ball 12 times, but he had over 200 yards, 17. Man. Hold on 1 second. This whole time, guys. Let's see real quick. Yoo-hoo! Come on, Bryce, where are you on that one, right? Just kidding. All right, so I'm sorry. I didn't get to see that. Y'all actually didn't even see my top 25. Holy shit. I'm so sorry about that. There it is right there. I'm gonna have that one. It was all on me, I've had so many requests just to look at my beautiful face that sometimes I forget to show all the good stuff on there. So there it is right. Come on, Bryce. Oh man, so there's my top 25. Sorry guys, I thought you wanted to look at me. So here you go. There is top 25. Take a look at that. I'll give you about 5 seconds. Then we'll move on to number 1 in the Heisman race, which is going to be Jalen Hurts, 20 for 23. Boomer Sooner, right? Then you go into Travis Etienne Jr. He had 12 carries for over 200 yards, 17.1 yards a carry he averaged. Every time he touched the ball, he averaged 17 yards. That's almost 2 first downs. 2 first downs a carry. He obviously had the big one, the big rush at the beginning for 90 yards. But man, he's good. Nobody is giving this guy love, so I am right here. I don't care about Trevor Lawrence right now. Travis Etienne Jr. impressed me. Feed the beast. All right, now we're gonna go number 3. What? Anthony? Who's Anthony Gordon? I know. Take a breath. Tua is not there. I get it. Take a deep breath. Let's all do it together. Anthony Gordon was the passer of the week this week. He killed it. He goes in and let's see. There you go. Washington State right there against Mike Leach. 35 passing attempts. He completed 29% of them. That was a phenomenal completion percentage. He threw for over 400 yards, 420 to be exact, which is averaging 12 yards a pass, which is more than Tua. He threw for more than Tua. His completion percentage was just as good as Tua. Touchdown to interception ratio. He threw 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, had a QBR of 230. I'm pretty sure that's second in the NCAA this week. So look that up. But Anthony Gordon, your performance over this past week put you in the number 3 on my Heisman list. I'm not gonna try to predict who's gonna kind of win that at the end of the year. I think that's a little bit unfair week by week for all those who perform phenomenally, and just because they weren't on the list at the beginning of the year or they didn't get as much recognition, I think that's silly. I think this guy has almost every stat is better than some of those guys out there that people have on their Heisman list. So I'm gonna give him some love right here. This is Anthony Gordon, Washington State quarterback. Dude's a monster. All right. Here you go. Here's your Tua fix. Not saying he wasn't great, but he wasn't as good as those other 2 quarterbacks that I have on the list at number 1 and number 3. But number 4, I do have Tua Tagovailoa. He did great. He did have 26 completions over 31 attempts. He threw for 336 yards. 4 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions, and he had a QB of 94.9. I think he did great. It was a very sluggish start, something that shouldn't happen whenever you're on the most dominant team in college football. Whenever you're playing a team like Duke that just lost their quarterback in the first round of the NFL draft, you expect them to have the sluggish start and them to be scoreless in the first quarter, not you. It was 0-0 at the end of the first quarter, and they finally pulled away a little bit. It was 14-3 at halftime, and then the second half, obviously, they started dominating, and he looked like Tua like he did the Tua at the beginning of the season last year. Plagued by injuries kind of towards the end. So Tua Tagovailoa's got my number 4 player in the Heisman list. Now we're going to go to number 5. With Jonathan Taylor. I mentioned him a little bit earlier, running back for Wisconsin. He's one of the most all-around complete backs in the NFL. I keep saying he's going to be in the NFL, and he's going to be damn good, I promise. But Jonathan Taylor, love the guy. 16 carries. He just doesn't get the ball as much as some of those other guys, which I have an honorable mention just right outside my top 5 that I've got here coming up, and that guy got the ball 20 plus times. But Jonathan Taylor, Wisconsin, 16 carries, 135 yards, 2 touchdowns. He averages 8.4 yards a carry. That's incredible. You'd have to be a third and 9, and he. You hand the ball off to him, and he's just going to about get there. That's pretty much what that means. So he 8.4 yards a carry. He had 2 touchdowns on the ground. And then just to throw on top of that, how he wanted to show how good of a receiving back he is. He caught 2 passes for 2 touchdowns, 48 yards total. So averaging 24 yards of reception. But I'm sure it could have been much longer. He just ran out of real estate and ran into the end zone. Jonathan Taylor, he's all-around complete back. I'm extremely excited. He dominated last year, led the entire college for rushing yards last year, and he has a very, very strong possibility of doing that again this year. So Jonathan Taylor ends my top 5 for the Heisman list. But hold on one second. I do want to throw out an honorable mention. This guy, I sat there and I even asked a couple of third-party unbiased opinions on this, but it was between one of these 2 guys. Obviously I ended up picking Jonathan Taylor, but I have an honorable mention, and that comes from Oklahoma State. He's my honorable mention. Chuba Hubbard, guy is really, really good. He played a little bit last year, but he was the backup behind Justice Hill. So whenever Justice Hill's out there doing this thing, running a 4-3 sideline to sideline, outrunning everybody, doing circles, this is a guy that's going to bulldoze you. He actually came in during the Bedlam game, Oklahoma State last year, because Justice Hill got hurt, and he tore it up for the rest of the season. He had 121 yards on 26 carries. Excuse me. He had 3 touchdowns. I almost said 4. 3 touchdowns and average 8.5 yards a carry. Just over 8.4, which was Jonathan Taylor, but he didn't have any receptions. He's not, that receiving back for Oklahoma State. So that's why I tipped the cap to Jonathan Taylor. But Chuba Hubbard, dude, keep doing what you're doing. And I wish you the best of luck, but you made my honorable mention for the Heisman list. So last thing before we finish everything up, I love everyone giving me feedback, telling me what they liked about my list, what they didn't like about my list, telling me to go to hell, tell me, I'm the smartest person, which, I pretty much am when it comes to football. But I'm gonna catch some flack on Trevor Lawrence not being up on that list. But here's some visual proof for you that I don't think, because of his performance on week 1, that he should be up there. All right. So I've got a couple guys' names up there. Actually, the last 3 Heisman winners. You might have heard of them. Last year, 2018, was Kyler Murray of Oklahoma. 2017 was Baker Mayfield of Oklahoma. And then Lamar Jackson, which was Louisville Cardinals in 2016. So I have, out of that year that they won the Heisman, their worst game. Statistically, every single one of those 3 guys, their worst game. And then I have Trevor Lawrence's game from week 1. And you tell me. So you got Lamar Jackson in 2016 going against Kentucky, which is not that good. They were good last year, but 3 years ago especially they weren't. Stoops didn't have them ready to go then. 16 completions on 25 attempts, 281 yards, 64% completion rating, 2 touchdowns. He had 3 interceptions. Didn't have his longest passer run for some reason. Come on, ESPN. But then he had 25 carries on 171, 6.8 yards a carry, and 2 touchdowns. So he still had 4 touchdowns versus 3 interceptions, which, the 3 interceptions really kills you, but better than Trevor Lawrence. Look at the very, very, very bottom. He's got 13 of 23. Not a good completion rating. 56.5. That is the lowest of there. He only threw for 168 yards. That is the lowest out of all of them. He threw for 1 touchdown. That is now he did run for a touchdown, so I'll give him 2. I'll put 2 up there, but still, it wasn't that good. The 1 touchdown that he had, so he had 1 rushing touchdown, which was aided because Georgia Tech can't field the punt. They muffed the punt, and it was right there, 10 yards to go. So it was fumble aided, if you will. And then his passing touchdown, albeit he made the right read, threw it deep down the left side of the field on the sideline. The throw was good, but the catch and the run by the receiver trumps that. It was twice as good as the throw. So, he did good, but that's not Heisman numbers right there. That's why he's not on my Heisman list. You can't sit there and tell me that bottom stat line right there is a Heisman Trophy winner. He threw 2 interceptions against Georgia Tech. Anyways, I don't know. So we'll go down to Baker Mayfield's final year against Georgia. He had 23 completions on 35, so he still threw for 65. He completed 65% of his passes. He threw for 287 yards. He only had 2 touchdowns, but he only threw 1 interception. His long was a 45. His career was, and this is against an SEC team. So the fact that you're doing that against Georgia Tech, one of the worst teams in the ACC, it only helps but justify why he's not on my list. And then obviously, he didn't really carry it because he had 1 yard and 0 touchdowns. And then you go to Kyler Murray, which was against Texas Tech. Dude started off very badly. He was only 20 for 35, which is 57.1, but it's still better than that 56.5. He threw for 360 yards. He threw for 3 touchdowns, and he ran for a touchdown. He had 11 carries on 100 yards. And averaged, over 9 yards a carry. So you look at those 3 guys. Those are the last 3 guys that won the Heisman in their worst games. And then look at Trevor Lawrence. the Heisman favorite. Everyone, expects him to be that guy on that team. And I'm just wondering where the love is for Travis Etienne Jr. So, Mr. 17 yards a carry every time you give him the ball. So, first game of the season, so it's not he didn't shoot himself in the foot. He just stubbed his toe. He had a bad first game. He has he has one of the best defenses in college football. That kind of helps pick up his slack, if you will. And then obviously Travis Etienne Jr. And then you've got the receiving core for Clemson, which I could list you like 5 Pro Bowlers from the NFL that have come out of there over the past 5-10 years or so. That shows you that they'll always be good at wide receiver, kind of like Oklahoma is with a couple of positions, kind of like Alabama is with defensive players, Clemson with defensive. So there's you kind of get into a rhythm. Once you get a good player in there, recruiting for that position is a lot easier because they then they want to be the next Adrian Peterson, or they want to be the next Julio Jones, or they want to be the next Deshaun Watson for Clemson. Trevor Lawrence. So. All in all, like I said, he didn't kill him. He didn't shoot himself in the foot. He just stubbed his toe. So it's not to say he won't finish the list at number 1 at the end of the year. But as of this week for me, Scranton Strangler, he's not even in the top 5, not even in the top 6, because I put Chuba Hubbard over him. So so that's going to be everything for me, guys. I appreciate y'all stopping by. Again, everybody, if you haven't already, I appreciate y'all. Hit that follow button at the top, and check out my other social media so y'all know when I'm going to be streaming. I try to do it every day, if not every other day or so, whenever I've got some good college football, NFL related, and even some try to have some fun playing some video games with you guys. But that's going to be it. I'm not going to have a football stream on tomorrow, sadly enough. That's kind of my rest day on Wednesday. And then we're going to hit it head on full force for Thursday night football. We've got NFL opening game, which is going to be the Packers versus the Bears. I'm excited. Trubisky versus Aaron Rodgers. It's going to be a while since we've seen Aaron Rodgers on the field. And hopefully he's going to stay healthy, because last year's first game of the season didn't end too well for him. So even though he came back and finished it, won the game for him. So guys, y'all are awesome. Love y'all. Y'all are the reason why I do this, and have a good one. Scranton Strangler out.